Hello students, I welcome you all to OBGYN with Mackler. So in previous module we discussed about the Kallmann syndrome. So now we are discussing about a group of spectrum which is termed as primary amenorrhea with the uterus being present. So with the uterus being present, there are four conditions ideally. One is cryptomenorrhea, Kallmann syndrome, Swyer syndrome and Turner syndrome. In this module we are going to deal with primary amenorrhea with the uterus being present, and the condition is going to be about the Turner syndrome. Right, we all know that this Turner syndrome is a very important group of disorder, right? So it's been frequently asked in your pediatrics as well. So it's very important to learn about this syndrome as well. Okay, so let's learn about this syndrome. Okay, so what is the karyotype of Turner syndrome? The karyotype is going to be 45XO. Is that clear? Yes, it is 45XO. Now see, only one X chromosome is present and the other X chromosome is absent, it is missing, or it is either structurally altered. So only one X chromosome is present. We all know that the normal is going to be 46XX, but here 45XO is present, right? So we all know that for the proper development of the ovary, both the eggs are required for the proper development of the ovary, but in these patients, since only one X chromosome is present, for that reason, therefore the gonad is going to be not properly developed, so it is going to be streak ovaries. Streak ovaries are underdeveloped ovaries. So only if both the X chromosomes are present in a female, she will have a properly developed ovary. If one X chromosome is actually going to be structurally altered or it is going to be missing, then therefore the gonad development is going to be underdeveloped streak ovaries. And the most important point is that these streak ovaries are not malignant. Streak ovaries are not malignant. Is that clear? So in this, where is the problem out of this 1, 2, 3 and 4? That is the hypothalamus, anterior pituitary, ovary and the uterus. The major problem here is about the ovary, right? Turner syndrome is all about the ovary and the uterus. So it involves the ovary plus the uterus. I'll discuss about that. Okay, so we have learned about the gonad is going to be a streak ovary, and the streak ovary is not malignant at all, right? Okay, so we have discussed about the gonad. Now let's see what is going to happen. We all know that from the ovary, the granulosa cells and the theca cells, the hormone estrogen, progesterone, inhibin B, androgens and ovulation, everything is going to happen. Am I clear? Yes. So hormone estrogen is very important for the proliferation of the uterine endometrium, the growth of the uterus, as well as for the proper proliferation of the uterine endometrium. Only when the estrogen is acting on the uterus, then the progesterone will support the uterine endometrium. The uterus which is not primed by the estrogen, then the progesterone will never act on that uterine endometrium. So only when estrogen is present, then progesterone will come into play in the uterus. After that, when there is going to be estrogen present for 200 picogram for 48 hours, LH surge is going to be happen. Then ovulation, where the secondary oocyte formation with corpus luteal formation is going to happen. So this is the normal sequence which happens in every other female. But here, since the ovaries are going to be underdeveloped, therefore the levels of the estrogen hormone which is going to be released from the ovary, that is from the granulosa cells and from the luteinized granulosa cells, we all know that progesterone will get released. Therefore the levels of the progesterone and the estrogen is going to be decreased. So estrogen is going to be decreased and progesterone is going to be decreased. Why? Because this is because of that fact that since the ovaries are going to be underdeveloped ovaries, therefore the ovaries can't release normal amount of estrogen and progesterone. So for that reason, the estrogen and progesterone which is getting released from the ovaries are decreased. But any problem about this is going to be normal. So from the hypothalamus, there is no problem in hypothalamus. So from the hypothalamus, GnRH will get released. Okay, this GnRH then acts upon the anterior pituitary, and therefore LH and FSH will get released. This LH and FSH will act upon the streak ovaries. Since it acts upon the underdeveloped ovaries, therefore from the granulosa cells, there is going to be decreased estrogen. From the luteinized granulosa cells, there is going to be decreased progesterone. Is that clear? Yes, we all know that estrogen has a negative feedback on FSH. Progesterone has a negative feedback on FSH and LH when present in low concentration. Is that clear? Yes. So this negative feedback is actually going to get lost because since this estrogen and progesterone itself is very decreased, so when the estrogen and progesterone is getting decreased, therefore the negative feedback which it has on FSH and LH is also going to lose. So therefore the levels of FSH and LH is going to increase in such females. Is that clear, students? So I want it to be very clear for you. See, it's very clear that estrogen has a negative feedback on FSH. Progesterone has a negative feedback on FSH and LH. Estrogen also has a negative feedback on FSH and LH. Is that clear? Yes. So when the levels of FSH and LH is going to be decreased since it has a negative feedback when the estrogen is present in normal concentration. So what do I mean is that in normal females from the ovaries, normally estrogen is going to get secreted in normal amount. So when the estrogen is going to be in the normal amount, therefore it will have a negative feedback on FSH and LH. It means that the levels of FSH and LH will decrease since it has since estrogen has a negative feedback on FSH and LH. But in patients with Turner syndrome, since the ovaries are streak ovaries, underdeveloped ovaries, therefore the levels of estrogen are not going to be normal. The levels of estrogen, progesterone and the other hormones, it is going to be decreased. Since the levels of estrogen itself is decreased, therefore the negative feedback it has on FSH and LH is going to get lost because the levels of estrogen is decreased. So for that reason, the negative feedback is getting lost and therefore the FSH and LH level will get increased. Is that clear? Yes. So ideally in any patient with Turner syndrome, the karyotype is going to be 45XO and the gonad is going to be streak ovaries. And these streak ovaries are not malignant. Is that clear? Yes. And as we have discussed, this estrogen is going to be less or decreased. Since the estrogen is decreased, the negative feedback it has on FSH and LH is also going to be decreased. So therefore the FSH and LH level will increase because the negative feedback the estrogen which had on FSH and LH is going to get lost because here the estrogen level itself is decreased. So since its level itself is decreased, it will never have any negative feedback on FSH and LH. Therefore the FSH and LH is going to increase. Is that clear? Yes. So FSH and LH is increased and estrogen is decreased. And then when we discuss about the breast, since the levels of estrogen is decreased, therefore the breast development is going to be absent. Is that clear? Okay, we're discussing about the pubic and axillary hair. We all know that androgen is very important for the pubic axillary hair in female, development of pubic and axillary hair in female. But here we all know that since the ovaries are streaked, therefore the levels of estrogen, progesterone, androgens, everything is going to be decreased. So since it is going to be very decreased, therefore the pubic and axillary hair development is going to be very scanty. Clear? Because the androgen which has been produced from the ovary is going to be decreased. So next we'll discuss about the internal genitalia and external genitalia. For external genitalia, testosterone or dihydrotestosterone has to be present in order to form a male external genitalia. Here there is no testosterone, no dihydrotestosterone because there is no Y chromosome. Only when the Y chromosome is present, when Y chromosome is present, then the SRY gene is going to be present on the Y chromosome, which will lead to the formation of testosterone and dihydrotestosterone. Since there is no Y chromosome in the karyotype of Turner syndrome, there is going to be female external genitalia. And the internal genitalia is also going to be female internal genitalia. But the thing is that the uterus is again going to be hypoplastic uterus. Why? Because we all know that estrogen is very important for the proliferation of the uterine endometrium and the proper growth of the uterus. Is that clear? Yes. Since the estrogen is very decreased in this female, therefore the uterus is going to be very hypoplastic, underdeveloped uterus. Is that clear? So the gonad is going to be streak ovary, internal genital organ is going to be female internal genital organ, but the uterus is going to be hypoplastic. While discussing about the external genital organ, it is female external genital organ. Breast is going to be absent as the estrogen is decreased. Pubic and axillary hair is going to be scanty because the androgen that is getting released from the ovary is also decreased. FSH and LH is going to be increased because the negative feedback estrogen had on FSH and LH is going to be lost. So because of that reason, FSH and LH will be increased. Estrogen is going to be decreased. Okay. Now, what is that one differentiating factor between this Turner syndrome and the Kallmann syndrome? We have two differentiating factors. LH and FSH is going to be increased in Turner syndrome because estrogen is decreased in Turner syndrome. Therefore, the negative feedback is getting lost. Is that clear? Yes. In patients with hypothalamic failure or the Kallmann syndrome, the problem is in the hypothalamus itself. Therefore, when GnRH will never act on the anterior pituitary, therefore the LH and FSH level is going to be decreased. So when the FSH and LH level is going to be increased, it is going to be Turner syndrome, and when it is decreased, it is going to be about Kallmann syndrome. Is that clear? Okay. The second most important differentiating factor is that in persons of Turner syndrome, they are going to have short stature. It is because of the mutation in the short stature homeobox gene, which is also termed as SHOX gene. Because of the mutation in the SHOX gene, patients of Turner syndrome is going to have short stature, whereas in patients with Kallmann syndrome, the stature is going to be normal. So this is the differentiating factor. What is the same factor in both Turner syndrome and in Kallmann syndrome? As the estrogen is going to be decreased, the uterus is going to be hypoplastic uterus. Okay, clear? Yes, okay. Now, what are the features of Turner syndrome? There are certain typical features of Turner syndrome. Is that clear? So the first feature will be short stature. Definitely because of the mutation in the SHOX gene, there will be short stature. Yes, and the hairline will be low posterior hairline. Low posterior hairline. And then the patient will have widely spaced nipples. The nipples will be widely spaced nipples, and the chest will be shield shaped. Shield shaped chest. And the nails will be small, and the metacarpal will be shortened, which is shortened metacarpal. And since the uterus is hypoplastic, the patient will never have any menstruation. So amenorrhea is also a feature. And the ovaries are going to be streak ovaries, which is also known as underdeveloped ovaries. How about the breast development? Breast development is going to be absent or underdeveloped, poor breast. And a fold of skin will be present in the neck. And in the body, you can see certain brownish spots can be seen in the body. These spots are called as nevi, right? So let's say, for example, this is going to be the hand of the patient. There can be certain spots which are present in the body. Yes, so these are the brown spots which are called as nevi. Is that clear? Okay, so what are the features of Turner syndrome? Short stature, the hairline, the posterior hairline will be very low, and widely spaced nipples, shield-shaped chest, shortened metacarpal, the nails will be small, the patient will complain of absence of menstruation, the gonads will be streak ovaries, absent or poor development of the breast, fold of skin will be present in the neck, brownish spots, nevi. And the hand will be in such a position of cubitus valgus. If this is the body, then the hand will be very close to the body, which is termed as cubitus valgus. Cubitus valgus. Is that clear? Okay. So, and the patient is also prone for the heart diseases. The patient also has certain heart diseases, which is the most common. Bicuspid aortic valve. Aortic valve will be bicuspid aortic valve, and coarctation of the aorta. So both the problems are related to the aorta, but there will be coarctation of the aorta or the bicuspid aortic valve. These are the heart diseases in any patient with Turner syndrome. So these are the important features of Turner syndrome, right? So what is the prevalence? It is ideally 1 in 2000 live-born females. So in 2000 live-born females, about 1 patient will have this Turner syndrome. So Turner syndrome, the prevalence is 1 in 2000 live-born females. Okay, clear. About most of the cases will end up in abortion, because when we identify that the female is carrying a fetus who is having Turner syndrome with karyotype 45XO, the patient will opt for abortion, because this feature is going, the patient with Turner syndrome is going to have so much problems. As we have discussed earlier, there are so much features in a patient with Turner syndrome, and definitely it is going to cause much morbidity in such patients, right? So because of that reason, it will end up in abortion in most of the cases. Okay, so let's say, for example, a patient with Turner syndrome, the patient is born, and these are the features which are going to be present in that patient. Now, how are you going to take this patient? Since the management of this condition will consist of, initial step will be growth hormone administration. And this has to be done in the earlier period of life. Let's say, for example, 8 years. Within 8 years, 8 to 10 years, this has to be done. Very important, because before the onset of the puberty itself, that is the median age for the puberty, we all know that it is starting from 10 years to 12 years, right? So before that period itself, we have to administer this growth hormone, because the earlier the growth hormone is administered to a patient, the better would be the chances of growth in this patient, because this growth hormone administration is not successful in every single patient. So because of that reason, the earlier you administer this growth hormone, the beneficial effect will be much more, right? So because of that reason, growth hormone has to be administered within an age of 8 years. Okay, following that, what are you going to do? You have to give around the age of puberty. This patient will never have puberty, because we all know that the gonad is going to be a streak ovary. So because of that reason, and the uterus is going to be hyperplastic, the patient will never experience menstruation at all. So for that reason, you have to administer estrogen. What are you going to administer estrogen? I'm going to administer estrogen for a period of about 1 year for proper breast development. Since the breast development is absent in this female because of decreased estrogen, give estrogen for 1 year for the proper breast development. And then you have to give estrogen plus progesterone. Why? Because is that the uterus is present. Even though it is hypoplastic, the uterus is present. So whenever the uterus is present, you have to give progesterone along with the estrogen. So give estrogen plus progesterone. Okay. So these are the management of choice for this patient with Turner syndrome. As the ovary is concerned, the ovary is a streak ovary. It is an underdeveloped ovary. It doesn't have any malignant potential. So you need not go for any gonadectomy. So only thing is that only supportive management, give growth hormone for the proper development of the height of the patient, and then you can give estrogen followed by estrogen and progesterone since the uterus is present. Am I clear? Yes. So this is all about the Turner syndrome, right? So Turner syndrome, the feature is that any patient with complaints of primary amenorrhea with the uterus present, irrespective of whether it is hypoplastic or whether it is full developed, uterus present and increased in LH and FSH. The patient is a case of Turner syndrome. So uterus is going to be hypoplastic uterus. Patient with complaints of primary amenorrhea, increased LH and FSH, Turner syndrome. So same thing, only one word is going to be altered, and the differential is going to be altered is that when the LH and FSH is going to be low, then it is a condition of Kallmann syndrome. The karyotype of Kallmann syndrome is 46XX. The karyotype of Turner syndrome is 45XO. Am I clear? Yes. So we have discussed everything in detail about this Turner syndrome. So in case if you have any doubt regarding this topic, please write to us in the Mackler handle. I hope that I have made this topic very simple for you so that you can understand everything. In case if you have any doubts or you want me to repeat any other topic, please write to us in the Mackler handle. Right? So let's meet in another interesting session, students. Until then, please keep studying. Bye.